Imagine two powerful neighbors who don't like each other at all. They never fight directly with weapons, but every day they compete through spies, threats, technology, and influence. That's exactly what the Cold War was. It wasn't a war with tanks and bombs. It was a mind game, a global standoff between two superpowers, United States of America, USA, leader of the capitalist world, and Soviet Union, USSR, leader of the communist world. This war lasted from 1947 to 1991, and the entire planet felt its impact. Countries chose sides. Wars happened in other places. The fear of nuclear weapons was everywhere. But why? Why did these two powerful nations become enemies? And how did that tension shape the world we live in today? Stick with me as we break this down step by step, using simple words, easy examples, and powerful moments from history. Because once you understand the Cold War, you'll understand how today's world powers think, act, and compete. To understand the Cold War, we first need to understand why the USA and USSR hated each other. It all comes down to one thing: ideology, or in simple terms, how a country should run. On one side, you had the United States, the leader of capitalism. Capitalism is a system where people can own businesses, make profits, compete freely, and the government stays out of the economy as much as possible. You want to start a company? Go for it. You want to become rich? No problem. But the gap between rich and poor can be huge. On the other side, you had the Soviet Union promoting communism. Communism says everything should be owned by the people, controlled by the government, and shared equally. No rich, no poor, just equality. Sounds fair, right? But in practice, it often led to government control over everything, censorship, no freedom of speech, and people living under strict rules. So it wasn't just a fight about power, it was a battle of ideas. Should the world follow the American dream of freedom and competition, or the Soviet dream of equality and control? This difference caused deep mistrust. They believed the other side wanted to destroy their way of life, and from that fear, the Cold War began. Alright, so now we know why the USA and USSR didn't get along, but how did their rivalry affect the rest of the world? Let's talk about the Iron Curtain. No, it's not a real curtain made of iron. It was a symbolic line that divided Europe after World War II. On the west side, countries like France, West Germany, UK, and others supported by the USA, they followed capitalism and democracy. On the east side, countries like Poland, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, and others under the control of the Soviet Union, they followed communism and had one-party rule. Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain, was the first to call this division the Iron Curtain. And behind this curtain, the USSR controlled everything: media, politics, even what people could think or say. The world now had two clear teams: Team Capitalism, led by USA and Allies Team Communism, led by USSR and its satellite states. Each side believed the other was trying to dominate the world. They didn't shoot missiles at each other directly. Instead, they started spying, propaganda wars, nuclear threats, and even supported smaller wars in other countries. The Cold War had officially gone global, and soon, the arms race, the space race, and dangerous events like the Berlin blockade and Cuban Missile Crisis would take things to the next level. Now, let's step into the most terrifying chapter of the Cold War, the time when two superpowers pointed nuclear weapons at each other, and the world held its breath. After World War II, the USA had already dropped atomic bombs on Japan. The world saw the power of nuclear destruction. And the Soviet Union? They wanted that power too. And in 1949, they tested their first atomic bomb. From there, it was a deadly competition. Who can build more bombs? Who can make them faster, bigger, scarier? By the 1960s, both the USA and USSR had enough nukes to destroy the planet, not once, but several times over. This terrifying balance became known as MAD, mutually assured destruction. Basically, if one side launched a bomb, the other would launch back, and we'd all be gone. But it wasn't just about bombs, it was about who's smarter, faster, more advanced. In 1957, the Soviets shocked the world by launching Sputnik, the first satellite into space. The USA panicked. Are they spying on us from space? Soon after, the USA created NASA and sent a man to the moon in 1969. Space became a new battlefield, not with guns but with technology, pride, and power. But nothing was more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the USA. For 13 days, the world was on the edge of a nuclear war. Just one wrong move, and boom, World War III. Thankfully, leaders from both sides backed down, but it left a chilling reminder the Cold War wasn't cold because it was safe. It was cold because the heat of real war was always just one mistake away. Okay, so the USA and USSR never attacked each other directly, but that doesn't mean they didn't fight. They fought through other countries, and these were called proxy wars. Let's break it. The Korean War, 1950-1953. After World War II, Korea was split in two. South Korea, backed by the USA, North Korea, backed by the USSR and China. In 1950, North Korea invaded the South, trying to spread communism. The US sent troops. China joined the fight. It got bloody. In the end, no one won. Korea stayed divided, just like the world. Even today, North and South Korea are still technically at war. The Vietnam War, 1955-1975. This one, it shook the whole world. The US feared that if Vietnam fell to communism, other countries in Asia would follow, what they called the domino theory. So they went in. For 20 years, the US fought against communist forces in Vietnam. But despite spending billions and losing thousands of lives, America lost. Vietnam became a communist country. It was a humiliating defeat, and it made Americans question, was this Cold War even worth it? The Soviet-Afghan War, 1979-1989. This time, the Soviet Union was the one who invaded a country, Afghanistan. But guess what? The USA supported Afghan fighters called the Mujahideen by giving them weapons and money. Even though the Soviets had more power, they couldn't win. It drained their economy, their morale, and it was one of the reasons the USSR collapsed a few years later. Through these proxy wars, the Cold War caused real bloodshed, even if it wasn't between the USA and USSR directly. People suffered, countries were torn apart, and all of it was because two superpowers wanted to prove who was right. After decades of tension, war, and fear, the Cold War didn't end with a bang. It ended with a slow, surprising collapse. Let's talk about how and why the mighty Soviet Union finally crumbled. By the 1980s, the Soviet economy was in big trouble. Too much money had gone into military spending, not enough into food, housing, or innovation. People were frustrated, poor, and tired of living under strict communist control. Meanwhile, in the USA, Ronald Reagan became president. He increased military pressure, calling the Soviet Union an evil empire and launching the Star Wars defense plan. The Soviets simply couldn't keep up. They were running out of money, options, and energy. In 1985, a new Soviet leader took power, Mikhail Gorbachev. He realized we can't go on like this, so he introduced two big changes: glasnost, openness, freedom of speech, more transparency. Perestroika, restructuring, reforming the economy to be more efficient. At first, people were hopeful, but then these changes backfired. People started demanding more freedom. Countries in Eastern Europe wanted independence. In 1989, the unthinkable happened. The Berlin Wall, the symbol of communist control, was torn down by the people. Germany reunified. Other Eastern European countries broke free. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. The Iron Curtain was shattered, and just 2 years later, in 1991, the Soviet Union officially collapsed. 15 separate countries were born, including Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and others. The Cold War was over. No bombs were dropped, no final battle, just the fall of an empire under the weight of its own flaws. The USA won the Cold War, but at a massive cost. Millions had suffered in proxy wars. The world had lived in fear of nuclear war for decades. The Cold War wasn't just a conflict of weapons, it was a battle of ideologies, of pride, of fear. It showed us how dangerous competition can be when the world is divided, and it reminded us that peace isn't the absence of war, it's the presence of trust, dialogue, and balance. Let's not forget the past. Let's learn from it and build a better future. This was the Cold War, explained simply. If you like this video, don't forget to like this video. And don't forget to share with friends. If you're new, then subscribe my channel for more interesting videos.